using the A1307. So what's the problem that this scheme is trying to solve? So on a typical weekday morning at peak time, the slide we've got here is from Google from a Wednesday at 8 a.m. You can see that traffic is queuing from the roundabout on here, which is at the Hinton Way roundabout. So this is the A1307, the A11 is down here, and this is the Cambridge Biomedical Campus here. So traffic is backing up from the Adam Brooks roundabout to the Hinton Way roundabout, which is about 1.4 kilometres. At peak times, traffic's also slow from the Adam Brooks roundabout into central Cambridge along Hills Road. However, much of the traffic's actually going to places on Hills Road, such as Perth School. But buses, so the park and ride is here, and buses actually can and do avoid the majority of that queuing traffic by using a road called Warts Causeway, which is a small minor road, which is bus only during peak times. So they come out of the park and ride, travel up here, down Warts Causeway, and then enter the traffic here. So the actual extent of their queuing is only 300 metres down to the Adam Brooks roundabout during the morning peak time. During evenings, if I just go back, sorry, to this side, what you can see from this is that there's no congestion at all between the A11 and the Hinton Way roundabout. If you go to the evening peak, which this is a Wednesday at 5:30 p.m, you can see that outbound there is some queuing traffic at the Baberham Research Campus roundabout, which is a relatively new roundabout, and we believe that's partly because people coming out of the campus have right of way, and that's causing, rather than people using the A1307. So the Cambridge Biomedical Campus employs currently about 20,000 people and is proposed to increase to around 40,000 people over the next 20 years. And that will include up to 4 hospitals and all their visitors as well. New employment is also being planned for the station area of central Cambridge. The new railway, Cambridge South, is being built next to the campus and is planned or scheduled to be open in 2025. So that's over here. There is already a park and ride, which I mentioned, which is here on Baberham Road, and a significant number of workers at the campus park here in the morning and cycle and walk to the biomedical campus. At the minute, although the traffic backs up to the park and ride entrance, vehicles aren't queuing to get into the park and ride, either the buses or the cars, because they turn right at this roundabout, travel up here, and the entrance is off this road here at the moment. However, it is assumed that as more jobs are created, that the amount of traffic using the A1307 will increase, and that would result in traffic starting to back up along the A1307, which would mean then both vehicles and cars potentially queuing before they get to park and ride here, as well as leading to longer journey times. It's important to say that this scheme is not associated with any particular housing scheme. So those of you familiar with the Cambridge to Camborne busway scheme, where there is a new town being built at Camborne, this is not the same. So there's no housing developments associated with the Cambridge South East Transport Scheme. And it's also worth saying that outside of peak hours, there is no congestion on the A1307 inbound or outbound. So this is just dealing with a peak hours congestion problem. So what's the GCP solution to this? So their proposal is to build a new and larger park and ride site just off the A1307 close to the A11 to intercept drivers heading into Cambridge and campus. The current park and ride would remain operational on the A1307. They would build 8 kilometres of new bus-only road through open countryside to join the Cambridge Biomedical Campus, where it would eventually join the road network there and eventually join up with the existing guided busway, which would enable buses to travel on that busway to Cambridge Station. From Cambridge Station, buses would have to enter the road network and then travel on the road network, probably to Drummond Street in the centre of town. There will be 3 new bus stops on the extremities of Great Shelford, Stapleford and Silston, and it would cost around £130 million, which was the estimate in 2020, and probably around 20% higher now. So what will be the impact of this scheme? So there'd be a very large park and ride site is proposed. there will be 3 bridges constructed to cross the waterways in the area. So these are 3 chalk streams. So there'll be 2 crossings of the River Granta. This is the proposed crossing near the Baberham with the Park and Ride in the background. This is the crossing of the River Granta near Stapleford. And there will be another bridge over the Hobson's Conduit near to the Cambridge Biomedical Campus. It would also be built across the lower slopes of the Gog Magog Hills, which is one of the most attractive landscapes in the Cambridge area. And it would be built through a new country park, which is not yet built, but will be built. And so the busway will harm the amenity of this new country park. There'll also be 5 road crossings, which will mean infrastructure associated with those, such as traffic lights, road markings, lighting and signage, which will cause greater urbanisation of the countryside and the villages. So how did we get here? Well, up until 2018, the GCP's preferred option was based on a scheme in the A1307 corridor. This is a sort of something from one of their reports showing that that was their thinking in 2017, and that was their preferred option. In 2018, they put forward a scheme for public consultation, which included a scheme in the A1307 corridor. So it included an inbound bus lane from the Baberham Research Campus to the current Park and Ride, and then a new dedicated public transport link between the Park and Ride and the Cambridge Biomedical Campus, and then onward into the city centre. However, you'll all be aware that in 2017, a new layer of local government was introduced, and we had a new mayor for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough who was given control of the transport planning. That new mayor, James Palmer, had plans for Cambridge Metro and insisted that all the GCP's major public transport schemes were capable of becoming part of his metro. And this meant that both the inbound and outbound bus lanes that were being proposed would need to be separated from general traffic. And that meant the option of using the A1307 corridor did not comply with the mayor's metro ambitions, and he made it clear that he would not support that option, and he would only support an option through the countryside. So this was what was called Strategy 1, which the GCP consulted on at the same time. You can see here a report from the GCP, which makes it clear that it was only that off-road strategy which had the support of the combined authority. And this was a significant factor in the GCP's decision to choose that option. Obviously, you're aware that in 2021, James Palmer was not re-elected, and the new and current mayor has dropped the plans for the metro, but that's not led to a review of the 2018 decision to put this scheme through the open countryside. So this has led us to promote an alternative. It's based on the GCP's original scheme for the A1307. And I want to hand over to Edward Lee, who's going to just talk us through that alternative.
Good evening. So my name is Edward Lee. I used to lead Smarter Cambridge Transport, and we developed a number of proposals, alternative proposals for Greater Cambridge Partnership schemes, including this one. I also sit on the Cambridge PPF Planning Committee, and I work with Cambridge PPF to develop this alternative solution. I now actually work in North Hertfordshire as a transport planner. So if we move to the next slide. So this alternative scheme follows the route of the A1307. So starting at the proposed Park and Ride by the A11, GCP has actually already installed or created an outbound bus lane from around the junction, just before the junction with Baberham Village. So that is already working for buses that are going outbound from there, which allows them to access the A11 interchange and then on to Linton and Haverhill more quickly. As James mentioned, the current main problem on this section is for outbound traffic at the Baberham Institute roundabout, because the vehicles coming out of the Baberham Institute turning right have priority over traffic going out along the A1307. This can be fixed really very simply by installing traffic lights at that roundabout to give priority to outbound traffic, particularly when there's a bus travelling. So we seem to have lost our slides.
Hello there. Sorry, I seem to lose internet power there. Sorry about that. I'm assuming you lost the slides over. Let me try.
Yes. Okay, so continuing into Cambridge, as you'll know, there used to be a dual carriageway running past Wandlebury, and one lane is hatched out, and that's simply because for safety reasons. But there's no reason why that lane couldn't be reinstated as a bus lane, and that would provide about a kilometre of bus lane on the existing road simply by repainting the lines. And then past as you get to the top of the hill and you go down, it will be possible to install about 1.1 kilometres of new inbound bus lane. We don't believe that would be needed initially because, as you saw earlier, almost all of the congestion is west of the Hinton Way roundabout. So actually there's almost never any queuing on this section. But nevertheless, it would provide a future proof for this scheme. That section could have a bus lane in the future. The main intervention is to provide a new busway link from around the Hinton Way roundabout of the Park and Ride entrance directly into the biomedical campus. And as James showed you, that was actually initially the GCP's preferred option in 2017 and was one of the options they consulted on in 2018. This would bypass the main length of congestion, which is into the Addenbrooke roundabout. And it would also allow buses to enter the biomedical campus through an area which is currently proposed in the next local plan to be built out as a kind of an eastern expansion or southeastern expansion of the biomedical campus. The busway would also come into the campus around where the Children's Hospital is due to be built. So it would serve that directly. And from the point where it enters the campus, buses could continue, as currently proposed with the GCP scheme, to join the existing guided busway over the railway line and then on into CV1 and the Cambridge station using the busway. Or buses could go to the bus station at the front of Addenbrooks and then continue up Hills Road. Either option would be possible with our scheme, as it would with GCPs, but ours would provide a better entry point into the campus to do that. It's worth noting that because our proposal passes the Baberham Park and Ride, this new section of busway would also serve the buses that are coming to and from the Park and Ride. So they too would be able to bypass that congestion to Addenbrooks roundabout, and they would be able to enter the biomedical campus directly. So that's a significant benefit that our scheme offers, which the GCP scheme doesn't. It also allows buses, say from Haverhill, to call at the Park and Ride. And this is important when the services are running at a lower frequency off peak. So in the evening, it would be possible to maintain a higher frequency of services to and from the Park and Ride, because longer distance buses would be able to provide that last link when there isn't demand just from the Park and Ride. That again is another significant benefit of this scheme over GCPs.
Could I just ask a quick question? My name's Denise Deere, I'm Baberham Parish Council. I just want to know on that map, between where it says Baberham Research Campus and there's a grey part of the road, which is from the, the little green bit that they've already got as a busway up to the A11 and then to the traffic light. What are you proposing for that grey part that goes from Baberham Village turning to Baberham Campus roundabout?
At this stage, nothing, because at the moment there isn't any problem.
Okay, that's fine. I just wondered. Yeah, thanks.
I think Denise, the grey on there just happens to be on the map. It's just outlining the Baberham Research Campus area on there. Okay, thank you, Edward.
The interventions are all shown in green, not.
Thank you. Thank you, Edward. So just back to me, we'll take questions on the route and everything at the end. So what I wanted to do now is just run through a kind of quick and informal comparison of the two schemes, the GCP's countryside proposal with with a scheme in the corridor along some of the sort of main criteria for this scheme. So first looking at journey time, as Ed was just shown, because the alternative scheme in the corridor would avoid buses queuing, actually in terms of the speed of the buses across both routes would be more or less the same. There's not much difference between the two. In terms of serving the Cambridge Biomedical Campus, the GCP scheme only serves the western side of the campus, whereas the scheme that we're proposing, as Ezra just said, would serve much more of the campus. But perhaps more significantly, since the GCP scheme came forward in 2018, the biomedical campus has put forward plans to expand as part of the next local plan, and they've been provisionally accepted as part of the local plan. And that expansion is along the A1307. So that expansion wouldn't be served by the GCP's proposal, but it will be served by the proposal that we are talking about. In terms of how these schemes would help the existing park and ride at Baberham Road, as Edward's just explained, the GCP scheme provides no benefit, whereas the scheme that we're proposing will provide a benefit to that service as well. In terms of serving Baberham Research Park, which is one of the other campuses in the area, the GCP's countryside proposal has bus stops up to a mile away, whereas the campus is already served by the Haverhill bus services and others on the A1307. So our scheme will continue to provide a better service to the Baberham Research Park. In terms of the delivery of these two schemes, the GCP proposal would require a Transport and Works Act order, which would involve a public inquiry, which would probably lead to a sort of 18-month long process and some uncertainty. Whereas the scheme that we're proposing would not require a TWAO to be built. It could be built under normal road building and planning powers, and therefore can be delivered much more quickly. And also, as Ed was pointed out, it's a series of interventions, and some of those interventions could be started almost immediately. For example, putting the part-time signals on the roundabout of the Baberham Research Campus would make an immediate impact in reducing congestion leaving Cambridge. So it provides benefits immediately, whereas the GCP scheme has to be built in its entirety before it starts to provide any benefits to current congestion. In terms of the financial risks, the GCP scheme involves building 3 bridges, and as we've seen with other engineering schemes in our area recently, that's resulted in both cost and time overruns. We're thinking of the Ely Southern Bypass and the Kingsdyke Bridge. Because the A1307 scheme doesn't involve any bridges or any complicated transport infrastructure, the financial risks are relatively low. In terms of technical risks, the GCP has not yet decided which guidance system it would like to run its buses on. Its buses must run on a guidance system because they can only use the Transport and Works Act order for that process. If they use a curb guidance system, which is the same system they currently use on the guided busway, or they might use an optical guidance system. The latter involves sort of lines on roads and the tracking system following those lines. But my understanding is that system, the optical guidance system, is not yet approved for use in the UK, and therefore there may well be issues for the GCP if they wish to use that guidance system. Our system doesn't require any guidance system at all, and therefore there are no technical risks associated to it. We touched on earlier that the GCP scheme is around £130 million plus 25% inflation. The scheme in the A1307 corridor will be around or less than £44 million based on the GCP's figures for its scheme. That also would be higher due to inflation. But overall, we're looking at something which is around 66% cheaper than the GCP scheme. And understandably, if you imagine that the benefits in terms of journey times are similar, but the costs are radically different, the GCP scheme has a benefit cost ratio or value for money ratio of poor, whereas the A1307 corridor proposal would be high or very high. The GCP proposal BCR is actually so low that it's below the Treasury Green Book standard. So if it was going through the Treasury's books, it wouldn't be allowed to proceed. In terms of community support, some of you might be aware that we're currently running a petition to ask the GCP to pause their scheme and look at the A1307 corridor. Has 3,700 signatories on it. In 2022, Anthony Brown, their local MP, ran a survey which received 2,000 responses. And of those 2,000 responses, 13% supported the GCP scheme, whereas 58% supported the alternative in the A1307. So hopefully that gives you some indication that the GCP scheme has very low community support, whereas the scheme in the A1307 has higher community support. So in terms of serving the villages of Sawston, Stapleford and Great Shelford, I'm just going to pass that over to Malcolm a bit later. So I'm just going to skip over to other bus services. Edward's touched already is that one of the things that the GCP hasn't really looked at with its scheme is the impact of what it's proposing on existing bus services. And there are a number of impacts here. One is potentially on bus services from the A1301, which is a parallel road to the south of the A1307, which serves the villages of Sawston and Great Shelford, which already has a regular bus service. And there is a danger that if some of the passengers from that service are drawn onto the GCP service, then that could put that service under pressure with a loss of benefit to the people who use that service. But there's also likely to be an impact on people using the Haverhill services, for example, which we're unclear how will work at the moment. So you might be aware that buses that use the busway to get to the Cambridge station have to be single decker because there's a low bridge, whereas the Haverhill services are currently double decker. So that would either mean running more buses from Haverhill to cater for the demand, or people on the Haverhill buses having to change buses at the new Park and Ride to get on the GCP buses. And we don't know how that's been thought through. We don't know what the services. We don't know if we don't know if services from Haverhill, for example, will continue on the A1307 down towards the existing Park and Ride and onwards. And if they do, then the scheme that we're proposing would provide great benefit for those buses because it would avoid them getting stuck in traffic. Whereas the GCP scheme would provide no benefit for those bus services at all. In terms of the new infrastructure being available to other vehicles, we touched on already the GCP scheme only available to adapted vehicles with guidance systems, whereas the system that we're looking at would be open to all buses and also emergency service vehicles, which might be an advantage for some of those wishing to access the Cambridge Biomedical Campus, particularly the Children's Hospital. In terms of the impact on the countryside and Greenbelt, both schemes will be in the Greenbelt. The GCP scheme is through open countryside and therefore will have a greater impact on the openness of the Greenbelt. And it would also have an impact on some of the rural amenity that is in that area as well. So, for example, there's a very popular walking route called the Stapleford Farm Track that's well used. The GC busway would go straight across that, urbanising what is very attractive and rural area at the moment. But I think the biggest concern from local communities is that the GCP scheme will create a new boundary or new edge to the villages, which will make them really very vulnerable to development. And we wanted to just show you this slide. This is the GCP's busway scheme overlaid onto a map of land which was put forward by people wanting to develop it as part of the local plan process. And you can see that there are a number of schemes that have come forward next to the busway, and they actually came forward specifically because they thought the busway was going to happen. That was their argument to the council for being allowed to build in the Greenbelt, was it would be adjacent to the new busway. So we know that there will be huge pressure on the Greenbelt as a result of the GTP scheme for housing and other development, and that in turn will have a greater impact on the Greenbelt and the countryside. Whereas our scheme on the A1307 corridor, if you look at this on the same map, has no proposed development along that section there as it goes over the Gog and Gog Hills. It does at the end near Cambridge, but as we said, that land is already in the local plan being released for development. So instead of going through the Greenbelt, that will be taken out of the Greenbelt. So the impacts and the pressure are likely to be much lower. In terms of the ecological impacts, the GCP scheme will cross 3 internationally important chalk streams and will go through a new country park, whereas our proposal goes through, there's no river crossings and no country parks for it to go through, primarily adjacent to the A1307 and a section of land which is currently countryside but will become part of the Cambridge Biomedical Campus. In terms of climate emissions, as you might imagine, building 3 large concrete bridges is going to use up a lot of carbon and construction, whereas the alternative proposal, because it doesn't have any buses, bridges or major bits of transport, and has much less road building, will use much less CO2 during construction and makes much more efficient use of the existing infrastructure. In terms of heritage impacts, we know that the GCP scheme will go through an archaeological site. We don't yet know what the heritage impacts of a scheme in the corridor might be, because no work has been taken to look at the archaeological area. And then finally, I just wanted to touch on the Haverhill to Cambridge Railway. One of the options that's a possibility in this corridor is to reopen the Cambridge to Haverhill Railway, either as a heavy railway or a light rail system, which would provide faster journeys from Haverhill and allow more people to be carried in carriages, and possibly would encourage more people from Haverhill and that area to use public transport for all of their journey, rather than driving to a park and ride in order to use public transport. This option was considered by the GCP very early on in their scoping process, but was ruled out because of the low cost benefit ratio and potentially because of the time scale it might take. However, as it turns out, the benefit cost ratio was actually similar or better for the railway than the scheme that the GCP is now proposing for the busway. And Rail Futures and Cambridge Connect and local MPs are now pushing for the railway to be reopened. I think it's fair to say that the railway is unlikely to be opened in the short term, but it remains a possibility in the medium to long term, especially with the Cambridge South railway station serving the campus. However, the construction of a £130 million or £150 million busway along the same route as the railway to the A11, we believe will be fatal for any business plan for the railway. In other words, meaning that it's unlikely that both schemes will be built. Whereas obviously our scheme doesn't compete in the same way with the railway, and it provides a short-term solution that doesn't preclude the longer-term option of reopening the railway in the way that the busway would do. So what I wanted to do, obviously one of the advantages that the GCP scheme could have over the A1307 is that it has the potential to serve the villages of Sawston, Stapleford and Great Shelford. So I wanted to hand back to Malcolm, who represents at least one of those villages, to talk about the extent to which the GCP scheme does or does not serve those villages. Malcolm.
James, thank you. Yeah, I mean, the biggest concern that we have is the distance that these stations will be from the centre of the villages. And as James has already alluded to, at the moment, the villages are well served by buses, the number 7 and the 31. And also we're very fortunate in Shelford to have a mainline station there. So we would be very upset, distraught if the new transport system began to impact on any of those, because as you can see from the map, the stations that they're proposing are so far away from the centre of the villages and the centre of our populations that they really will, I can't believe they'll actually be hardly used. I mean, there's going to be no parking there. There'll be blue badge parking and cycle parking and a drop-off zone, but there'll be no parking for users of the system to place their cars there during the day. So really, from our point of view, the distance from the cities, from the village centres, is really far too far for people to be using it. And the other issue we'll have, of course, is that given that we will be the last stop before the CBC, how much space will there be on the buses? Guys will walk up 15-20 minutes up the hills to the station and find they can't get on the bus. So from our point of view, as I say, we would be very loath to see any impact on our existing services, because it is a long way from Cambridge Road, which is the A1301, to those new bus stations. So yeah, we would be very disappointed. And similarly with the cycle routes, at the moment we already have National Cycle Route 11 going through Shelford, which is locally called the DNA path, that serves both Shelford and Stapleford and goes on to Sawston. The Linton Greenway has already been built along the A1307 from Cambridge to Babram and going on towards Linton. and the Sawston Greenway is very much in progress, and that will be serving the centre of Sawston. Whereas again, the main benefits of the cycle route that the GCP are proposing will be to the northeastern part of Sawston, which just will not be helpful to the rest of us. So really, from our point of view, as I say, we are very happy with our existing routes and cannot see any benefit coming from the new options. So basically, in summary, our alternative scheme has very similar benefits to the one being proposed by the GCP, but we believe it's going to cost less than roughly £100 million less than their scheme. It can be delivered in stages. It will have immediate impact. It will create much less environmental damage. And it certainly has the support of both my community and Stapleford and other communities as well. So thank you all so much for listening to us. Are there any questions?
I think in terms of taking questions from people, if you can put your electronic hand, that's the easiest thing for us to see because it appears in our screen, and then we can ask you to unmute yourself and speak. Naomi Bennett, do you want to go first? You're on mute, Naomi, that's it.
Sorry, it wouldn't let me go off mute originally.
Okay.
I was just wondering whether you'd thought about an equalities challenge for GCP proposals based on the impact on users with mobility issues and other sort of issues which make bus transport difficult. Because certainly the proposed bus stations on the GCP proposal would not be accessible by 14% of the population.
Wow.
I don't know about Naomi. I have to confess, unless others know otherwise, I don't think we've looked in detail at the bus schemes. I know that they'll have disabled parking, but they won't have parking for non-disabled users.
Yeah, but remember, a lot of disabled people don't have cars. The other issue I would raise is that Addenbrooke's is already saying that they have a lot of staffing difficulties. Children's hospitals are particularly intensive on staff ratios, and they use a lot of care assistants and junior nurses who are not well paid. A lot of those people used to live in my ward, Abbey. Vast chunks of them had moved out to Haverhill. So your proposal would be much more likely to get them staying in their jobs. So I think, it would be a huge benefit for proposed children's hospital. And I think that's worth looking at. So at this point, I will put my hand down and mute again. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it probably is just worth stressing there that the GCP's scheme, with the park and ride, it is sort of encouraging people to drive to use the park and ride, and that obviously contributes to the carbon footprint. Whereas ideally, we would like to see better bus services from the likes of Haverhill that come straight through, rather than using the park and ride to encourage people to not use their cars for such a large amount of their journey. So I think our scheme would still involve a park and ride, because we see that there would still be a need potentially for some people to park and ride near the A11, but a much smaller park and ride than the one the GCP has proposed. I'm going to take Peter Fane next, and then come to you, Alan, if that's okay.
Thanks, James. My question was about I understood at an earlier stage there was a spur road around Addenbrooke CBC site. Now, forgive me, I lost connectivity during part of your presentation, so I may have just missed that bit. Can you just outline again how that spur road, if indeed it is part of the proposals, would relate to the proposed new boundaries of the CBC site, taking account of the area that might be taken out of Greenbelt in the local plan?
Yeah, just bear with me, Peter, and I'll, although I wasn't very successful at sharing my screen earlier, I'll have another go at doing this because I think it would be easier to talk to this. So the area which is on the sort of left of the slide, which is from the Baberham Park and Ride, which is the spur which goes across into the Cambridge Biomedical Campus, that area of land which sort of the arrow is pointing at, this area here is earmarked to be taken out of the green belt and be the extension of the Cambridge Biomedical Campus. One of the things I should have said is that this land is owned already by the county council. So most of the land that's required for the scheme that we're proposing is already in the ownership of the county council, either because they own this area here or because the land in the highways can be achieved within the highway boundary for these sections here, which is why you wouldn't need to use the Transport and Works Act order in order to build this scheme, and you could use regular planning order. If there is some land in this area here where the landowner isn't willing to give it up, then that could be achieved through compulsory purchase. However, one imagines that if this scheme were built across here, then this land here would be vulnerable to development as well. So one would have thought the landowner would want to allow that to come forward. Does that answer your question, Peter?
Thank you. Yes.
Right. Alan.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, has anyone looked at the safety of this system properly? I believe on slide 16, when you were talking, you said that every vehicle using it would have to have guidance. Am I correct?
That's correct. The GCP's scheme is for guidance.
Yeah. So on the existing busway, there is a track alongside it for the emergency service vehicles. So how are emergency service vehicles going to reach an accident on this system?
So Alan, we should have said their scheme, depending which scheme they build, will depend whether there's a track or not. So if they decide to build the scheme which has the guidance system, there will also be a track alongside. So that will increase the impact on the countryside because you've got to have the 2 lanes for the buses and then also the access track. It's the access track which would then become the cycle route or active travel route that the GCP would use. However, if they choose to use an optical guidance system, there is no requirement for that to have an access track because it is just a road and emergency vehicles would have the same level of access. It remains questionable in that circumstance whether they would be able to use the Transport and Works Act order in order to build an active travel route alongside it or not. So there's some uncertainty depending on which of the 2 schemes the GCP decides that they want to build.
Okay, but in that second scheme, there would be limited width access. And in an emergency, you really want maximum width of access for emergency vehicles.
Well, you would, but it would the optical guidance system would be the same as a normal road. It operates.
Yeah, sure. No, I understand that.
Yeah.
Okay. Then another small point. You were talking about reopening the Haverhill line. One of the things we've been pushing for is to say, well, if East West Rail gets built, God forbid, then it already ought to use the northern route so that the Haverhill line, the Colne Valley line, can be reopened completely instead of trains going through the middle of Newmarket. And that would also provide Cambridge with a 3rd route to London, which seems to me much more beneficial than this scheme, which is purely local and doesn't seem to be thought through properly at all.
Alan, thank you very much for that. Edward, did you want to come back on any of that?
I just wanted to clarify about the land ownership. So the land between Hinton Way and the biomedical campus is all, that whole field is within the ownership of the county council. So therefore, to build the busway wouldn't require permission from any third-party landowner.
Thank you, Edward. Peter McDonald.
Hi, and I apologise if there's noise. I'm at Glasgow Airport, and they got rather racy music here in the restaurant area. It was just I wanted to get clarity and understand better from, especially the residents around Stapleford and those places, with regard to their fear on development sites, which was in one of the slides. Definitely at one level, I could understand that. but equally, my understanding is a lot of those sites have not been included in the plan, and therefore I totally understand why there would be some concern. But would there also be some more confidence that a lot of those sites did not come forward? Obviously, any developer worth their salt is going to pile in with, proposals for development around the GCP proposal. Really appreciate any perspectives on that. Thanks.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks for joining us from Glasgow. Malcolm, do you like to answer that?
Yeah, sure. I think that's a fair question, Peter. But I think from our point of view, I think when the call for sites went out originally, I think there was only about one field in the parish that wasn't actually included in the call for sites. So I think, we obviously living on the edge of Cambridge, we know that we're a permanent target, and I think it would make us feel more comfortable if something like this didn't happen, because it's just, the developers are always going to try and push the envelope, and something like this, particularly if with the retirement village in Stapleford going ahead, that's, it's already started, if you like, and I think it won't take long before the rest of it, comes forward and keeps getting pushed and pushed and pushed, and eventually it will go.
Thanks, Malcolm. Can I just add to that, Peter? Just so you're aware, one of the you might be aware that the GCP has been sort of trying to rework its scheme to go around this retirement village on the edge of Stapleford. When I talked to the officers there about trying to create a buffer between some of the houses which are close to the scheme and the bus stop, the officer did earmark some land to create a woodland on in order to provide a buffer. And when I went back to them to look at the scheme, the woodland had disappeared. And I said, well, what's happened to the woodland? And they said, well, the landowner won't allow us to have a woodland. He wants to build houses on it. And that's the challenge that you're up against. So we know from what's happened over the last 2 years that this isn't just the villagers being worried. There is genuinely, landowners out there who are coming forward with schemes based around the busway. And certainly that was the scheme near Babraham was based entirely around that, because the mayor went and had a conversation with them and they put that forward as a direct result of the conversation between the mayor and his metro at the time. Thank you, Peter. Claire.
I think you have to allow me to unmute, don't you? Yeah, that's working. Thank you. Hi, thank you for inviting us all to this. So I'm part of GCP. Unashamedly, it is a very difficult set of problems that we have to solve. And I'm here to listen to all good ideas. This sounds like a great idea on the face of everything that you've said. The purpose for doing what we're doing is to try and get sustainable access for the long term. So kind of last Wednesday's measurements are not what we're looking at in the long term. And my question is not at all defensive. It is just to say, have you got a model for the capacity for the daily journeys that you're expecting in 20 years' time? Because anything we build or do has got to be sustainable in the longer term. Thank you.
James, do you want me to answer that?
Yes, please, Edward. Thank you.
So in terms of modelling, we're not in a position to do that because we don't have the data. We don't have access to the Saturn model that the county owns, but they would be perfectly able to do this. And I don't believe that they would have proposed a scheme like this for consultation if they didn't believe it was future-proofed. So it was there in the 2018 consultation and was their preferred option before that. So I think we can be confident that yes, it is future-proof, because it is very similar to what GCP was originally proposing. And you're right that we're not building something just to solve today's problems, but actually today's problems are really urgent and we need an urgent solution to them. And waiting at least another 3 years, possibly 4 or more years for a solution to come on stream, particularly for the biomedical campus and the difficulty of recruitment that they're experiencing, a quicker solution would be hugely beneficial. Certainly what we're proposing has a lot of headroom for future increases in road traffic. When I talked about that, they're putting a bus lane down the hill from the Wandlebury to the Hinton Way roundabout, that would add that capacity. At the moment, it's not required, but it could be added relatively straightforwardly. But I think also when we're planning for the future, we shouldn't just be planning for a future in which there is more motor traffic, because actually that would be incompatible with decarbonisation. And actually national and local policies from the Combined Authority and GCP are looking to reduce car traffic, particularly in the city, and that will have a knock-on effect on traffic coming into the city. So I think actually planning for a future where the A37 will always be congested is probably more risky than planning for a future which is more like today or with less traffic.
Yes, and just on that, I'd say GCP is absolutely not trying to encourage more car driving by putting park and rides in. It is just accepting that we have to aggregate traffic outside the central ring, really, in order to get people who would otherwise come in all the way by car to get onto a bus if we possibly can get them to do that. The widths of the road, I certainly wouldn't like more buses going along Waltz Causeway if we can avoid that, because that is very narrow. But the other proposals do sound entirely sensible, as I say. So very much looking forward to analysing it properly and seeing what the differences are.
Thanks, Claire. Just to add to Edward's comment, the additional bus lane, which would be sort of up the hill and then past Wandlebury, would give you more than double the current queuing width. So you'd have to more than double the current amount of traffic on the A1307 before you started to use up that capacity. And obviously, because it is open countryside at that point, you could, if you wanted to, just continue to extend that bus lane back towards the Baber Research Campus, which actually was the GCP's proposal in 2018. So you've got a lot of capacity there. And I think
Yes.
Edward's right. If you've got cars queuing that long, then people are probably going to stop driving anyway, because the time it takes them to get in is too long anyway.
They seem happy to sit in queues for a long time at the moment. Party politics has really got in the way of everything we've been trying to do, and the mayor situation has been an absolute, nightmare to get through. So I do hear what you're saying. Thank you.
Yeah, James, the other point just to add on to that one is to say that if you want long-term capacity, then of course the Haverhill Railway is the one that gives you the most capacity. But if you build the GCP's proposal, then it'll be very hard to put that railway in place in due course. So ultimately, for long-term strategic capacity, you have to have the ability to do the railway, and putting this new kind of busway in place would stop that happening. Thank you, Stephen.
Andy.
Also, thanks from me. So I'm the university's representative on the GCP exec. So I think it's a really helpful presentation, very compelling. Having said that, the people in GCP are not unreasonable, and you must have discussed this with them. So my question is, what would Peter Blake be saying if he was here?
I'm trying to recall what Peter Blake said to us when we spoke to him about this. He seems to believe that bus lanes can't compete with busways, and there's a logic to this, because whenever bus lanes come to a junction in the road, there's a traffic light, and generally they have to stop and to allow other traffic to go, whereas a busway gets priority and goes straight through. And you can see that on the St Ives busway, and that's a view as to why busways are more successful than bus lanes. However, in this particular circumstance, as you'll have seen, there are no roads crossing the A1307 between the Bayburn Research Campus and the Hinton Way roundabout. So what Peter would say doesn't hold water. He's applying a theory which in practice is not relevant to this particular circumstance. So that's certainly one thing that he does talk about. About the bus lane not being as reliable and not allowing buses to flow, but we don't believe that's the case on this stretch of road because of the nature of the open nature, and there aren't any other roads in the way. So I think that's one of the things that he would say, Andy. I don't know, Edward or Stephen, if you can recall what Peter said when we met him.
Really, the emphasis is actually the point that Claire was making about sort of future-proofness, that building a new road effectively gives you double the capacity to get vehicles into Cambridge, and one of those roads would be exclusively for buses, so therefore buses would be able to offer a faster journey time under all circumstances in both directions. But what I don't think we've ever managed to sort of have a meeting of minds on is what actually is the extent of the problem that needs solving. There's no doubt that GCP's solution solves a problem, but it actually solves far more than the problem that it needs to. And given that GCP has significantly over-allocated its budget for schemes, I would have thought it would be a sensible conversation to have about being able to save money on some of the schemes, such as this one, in order to be able to complete other schemes, which might otherwise have to be cut. So I can't really answer your question, because I don't think Peter has ever really revealed his hand on this, but it seems to be really he wants a sort of, a gold-plated solution, when we're arguing actually it doesn't need to be gold-plated.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful.
Thanks. And Andy, Jeff. Oh,
yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, okay. Well, on a similar sort of theme, really. This is your proposed scheme would save a lot of money, and I just wondered what the rules are in terms of how the city deal can be spent, and what scope there is for using some of the money that wouldn't be spent on new busway being employed to improve the offer of travel by bus. I mean, for example, putting in the real-time passenger information systems, improving the bus shelters, maybe putting in some electric bus recharging infrastructure, that kind of thing, and also improving the rider experience by improving some of the road that your scheme would have to use. And what are the sort of limits around how you can use the saved money?
I can answer that.
Yeah, go on.
So most of the city deal money, the £500 million city deal money, if the GCP gets all of that, is for capital investment. So it is for building new infrastructure. But there is about another £250,000 of money which comes from other sources, Section 106, New Homes Bonus, and so on, which actually is much less ring fenced in terms of what it can be used for. So that can be used to pump prime bus services and do maintenance and various other things. But there is actually no direction to GCP on how to spend the city deal money. Government has handed that money over to deliver certain objectives. It is up to GCP to determine how to do that. And the only sort of monitoring of GCP is through 5-yearly gateway reviews, where DLUC commissions consultants to scrutinise GCP's work and sort of test it against the objectives. So actually, GCP has a lot of freedom in how it spends the money, as long as it meets the objectives of the city deal.
Can I just say that is very rigorous. The gateway process is a very rigorous procedure, which starts very early and continues a long time. And they got fantastic feedback, better than any of the other organisations around for the last gateway. So I will be slightly defensive on that one. It's a reasonably valid process, I think.
Thanks, Claire. Thank you, Jeff. Councillor Delaware Hussain.
Thank you very much, sir. Yes, I want to share one thing. At the beginning, you show some maps of where all the traffic is built, like after Edinburgh's Hospital to Hinton roundabout.
Yeah.
Traffic is at the moment. Maybe it will be not after 2 years. So when Cambridge South Station in Edinburgh will be in reopen, so I think so this traffic will be not there. That's the number one thing. And second thing, I need to prioritize all the local residents, their view and their opinion need to be heard. So the GCP sometimes they're doing, they're not exactly not listening people. They just anytime they close the road and the line and they're making more pollution and more congestion. Like in Cambridge City, at the moment, 11 road is closed. All the key roads, they build the traffic. These people saying it is like a manufactured traffic. It is purposely traffic. It is not natural traffic, because after Cambridge North Station is start, Cambridge City was not a bad traffic. When the COVID comes and we see the overnight, lots of plant pot comes in the middle of the road, and the road is closed now, become a metal barrier. saying now that time was COVID safety. Unfortunately, COVID don't choose any particular road. Now it's become metal barrier for public safety. I don't see any evidence any people die of the road accident or air quality pollution. So we need to think about the residents' view. What all the residents asking, we need to stay with them. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you for that. I think that the first point was relevant for the discussion, which is around Cambridge South Station and when that opens. Obviously, we won't know until it opens exactly how that affects travel patterns, but one would imagine that over time, particularly for new employees starting on the campus, it would have an impact, for example, on where they might decide to live. And the question is whether that actually then has an impact on the modelling that the GCP has done for its scheme in terms of where people might live and the travel to work area. So as an example, you might, when that's open, you could live in Waterbeach or Ely and get to the biomedical campus much more quickly. So you might decide to live there rather than in Haverhill, for example, where you might decide at the moment. So it will have an impact, but I don't think we could say at the moment what that impact would be. Jeff, you've still got your hand up. I didn't know if you had another question or if that's a legacy hand. Okay, taking that down. Thank you very much. Okay, does anyone else have any questions that they would like to raise this evening? Right. In that case, I'd like to thank you all for coming along this evening, giving your time to listen to us. It is very much appreciated. We will follow this up by sending you out some of the slides in a recording, but also a little briefing note which kind of summarises the presentation that we've given you this evening. If upon receipt of those or thinking about what we talked about this evening, you've got further questions or things that you'd like to talk to us about, then please don't hesitate to get in contact. We're very keen to have an open, honest, sort of transparent dialogue with people about the pros and cons of the two schemes in order to get the best decision for the future of Cambridge and for current communities. So thank you very much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thanks.
Thank you, James, Edward, Malcolm. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Bye. Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Very much. Bye.